Hi, I'm Dave Rea. I pledged the Reamer Club in, I believe it was the fall of 1960. I started at Purdue in 1958, and my major, the one I got my degree in, was chemical engineering. Graduated in 1962. Well, I grew up in a small town called Rocheville. That's right near Kokomo, about 35 miles east of Purdue. And that's where I went to high school and graduated from high school. It was called the Western School Corporation, and my dad was the superintendent of the school corporation. Well, I went on to graduate school at Princeton, and then I went to work for the DuPont Company and worked for them for about 34 years. And while doing that, we lived in several different places in the U.S., but then retired in 2001 and moved to South Florida, down between Fort Myers and Naples. And then 2 years ago, moved to a retirement facility here in Orlando. I thought the meetings that we had back then were pretty raucous, and a lot of, and of course we had the pledges, the skatas. They had to come up with the various cheers. They were in the process of memorizing various cheers, and so we had to listen to that. And of course, it had to be really at top volume. So the club meetings could be pretty rambunctious. Once I was active, when you went to the meetings, you held your breath to see whether the pledges were gonna, at least one pledge was gonna show up. And then if one pledge showed up, you knew the walkout was not going to be that night. So the whole idea was to try to pull this off without and have everybody be a part of the walkout without anybody being caught. Well, I think the big thing in the club was always the opportunity to be a part of where the Boiler Major Special went. Or even at home, being on the special, and because as a freshman and sophomore, you see this thing riding around on campus, and you see people riding on it, and you wonder, I wonder how I could be a part of that, and then all of a sudden you're in the Reamer Club, and so you have that opportunity. So that was a big deal, as I remember. And then, of course, at the Lions, that's always a big deal too. And as pledges, and then being on the other side of that when you're an active at the Lions. And then I think I forget what we called it, but the call-out night for the pledges, and getting people up at very early in the morning, which was not common, and getting everybody together and seeing if you had everybody that you wanted, and so forth. That was, and then if you were a pledge, finding out who else was going to be at the pledge class. So that was a great time too. I think most of the trips, as I remember, were pretty routine. We did go to some of the away games in Michigan, and I forget, maybe Illinois, and maybe one or two others, but all that was pretty much as had been done before. When I remember reading about the fact that we had some kind of a Trinity party with the Gimlets and the Gold Peppers, and invited the men's dean and the women's dean. And that was a big social function, and that was kind of an unusual thing. It hadn't been done before, and having all three of the groups together like that was a good thing. Reamers kind of prided themselves on really trying to boost school spirit for the sports, and I suppose that's still a primary thing that they're involved with. But that was really where our focus was and where our emphasis was, and so we tried to do those kinds of things whenever we had the opportunity. My favorite tradition was some of the cheers that we had, the engineer cheer, the pharmacy cheer, and a few others. Those were great. We had the card section. That was not a Reamer activity, but the card section, when I was there, and all the freshmen were supposed to be, or had the opportunity to be part of the card section. But then the tradition I liked the best was the senior chords. And because I had a good friend from high school who was a great artist, and he decorated my senior chords. And I happen to have those here. I still have those. And I'll show you what's on one of the legs of that senior chord. And there's a lot of I was a chemie, so that's part of it. And I forget what all is on here, but there's since it was chemistry, there was some chemistry on board this thing. So it's and I think my mother kept those for years and years until she said I had to take them, so I did and stuck them away. And I kind of forgotten I had them until recently. The senior chords, the decorated senior chords, and of course the beards that came along with the senior chords. Those were big traditions that the seniors there, and of course the actives in the clubs all had those. Well, I think a couple of things come to mind in terms of how the club affected me. First of all, it was a gathering of leaders from across the campus, and it was difficult to have that sort of opportunity in a lot of ways, and so it presented that as an opportunity. And secondly, then we had projects and we did things together, and you saw how, if you got your act together, you could really make things happen. And I think the special was really a great example of that, because, the special there was always maintenance, or there was some problem, or we were always looking ahead. And looks like we were going to need another one in the years ahead. How do we begin to finance something like that, and what should we be doing now? And so all those kinds of considerations. So I think it taught me a lot about teamwork and leadership, and that then served me well as I went on into my career later on. I have to add really special as well, because I think Boilermaker Special was really it really was something special for all of us. But I do remember a number of the people who were in the club, and the great times we had, both as pledges and also as actives later on when we were on the other side at the Lions, and the great times we had with the Boilermaker Special. Roger Brunstrom was the special manager, and what Roger said, that became the law as to how we managed the special, and that probably was a good thing in terms of how we conducted it. So, and everybody had a good time, and as we went to the football games or went around campus, went to various charitable activities with the special, it was a great time. And I still remember the engineers cheer and the pharmacy cheer all these years later, so I guess it was drilled into my head well enough while I was there. But being a member of the Reamer Club while I was at Purdue back in the 60s was a great part of my undergraduate years at Purdue. And then later on, when although I kind of lost contact with Purdue for many years, but then I came back in late in my career and began to become active again. And then I got very active working with some of the expansions at chemical engineering, and enjoyed that. The various people that I worked with there. So it was a great time at Purdue, and that was a great time later on in the career when I reconnected.